Every year in Canada, workers die in confined spaces. Not because the regulations don't exist, not because the hazards are unknown. They die because the systems designed to protect them weren't properly put in place. And here's the statistic that every supervisor and employer needs to hear. The majority of people who die in confined space incidents aren't the original workers who went in. They're the people who tried to rescue them, without the training, the equipment, or the plan to do it safely.
Today we're going to walk you through what Canadian OHS legislation and CSA standards actually require for confined space entry, and why every part of that system exists for a reason. Let's start with the definition, because in safety, words have legal weight.
Under CSA, and reflected in provincial OHS legislation across Canada, a confined space is any space that meets 3 criteria. 1. It's large enough for a worker to enter and perform work. 2. It has limited or restricted means of entry or exit. 3. It is not designed for continuous human occupancy.
That covers a wide range of workspaces: manholes, tanks, silos, pipelines, boilers, underground vaults, and more. If a space meets those 3 criteria, it's a confined space, and your employer has a legal obligation to identify it, evaluate it, and classify it. If that space also contains, or could contain, a hazardous atmosphere, an engulfment risk, or any other serious hazard, it becomes a permit-required confined space. And that triggers a full set of mandatory controls before anyone goes in.
So what makes these spaces so dangerous? The answer is mostly invisible.
Atmospheric hazards are the leading cause of confined space fatalities. Oxygen deficiency, when O2 drops below 19.5%, can cause loss of consciousness within seconds. There's no smell, no color, no warning. A worker steps in and they're down before they even realize something is wrong.
Toxic gases like hydrogen sulfide and carbon monoxide can reach lethal concentrations quickly in an enclosed space. H2S is particularly dangerous. At high concentrations, it paralyzes your sense of smell instantly. You lose your only warning sign. Flammable atmospheres from fuel vapors or solvents can ignite from a single spark. And physical hazards, engulfment in loose grain or sand, energized equipment, unstable structures, add additional layers of risk.
The reason restricted entry and exit matters so much is this: a worker who is incapacitated inside a confined space cannot self-rescue. That dependency is exactly why every other element of the confined space system exists.
Before anyone enters a permit-required confined space, a written entry permit must be completed and authorized by the entry supervisor. This isn't paperwork for paperwork's sake. It's the written record that every required control is in place. The permit must document the space being entered, the work being done, the names of the entrant and attendant, the atmospheric test results, the isolation measures in place, the PPE required, and the rescue plan. It must be signed. It must be posted at the entry point.
Atmospheric testing is required before entry, without exception, and it must be done in the correct order. First, test for oxygen. Second, test for flammable gas concentration. Entry requires below 10% of the lower explosive limit. Third, test for toxic substances like H2S and carbon monoxide. If atmospheric conditions change during the work, if a gas alarm activates, if the scope changes, if any unsafe condition is identified, the permit is canceled immediately and all workers exit. No exceptions, no schedule pressure overrides that call.
CSA defines 3 distinct roles in a confined space operation. Each one carries specific legal responsibilities. The entry supervisor authorizes and signs the permit, verifies all controls are in place before giving the go-ahead, ensures rescue services are ready, and has the authority, and the obligation, to cancel the permit if conditions change.
The authorized entrant, the worker going into the space, must know the hazards, use their PPE correctly, maintain communication with the attendant at all times, and exit immediately if the attendant gives the order, or if they recognize a dangerous condition themselves.
And then there's the attendant, also called the Confined Space Monitor. This person stays outside the space for the entire operation. They track who is inside, communicate with entrants continuously, monitor conditions, watch for signs of atmospheric exposure like confusion or slurred speech, and call for rescue the moment something goes wrong. Here is the rule that every attendant must know and every employer must enforce.
The attendant's job is to get help, not to go in.
The attendant must also have no other duties during the operation. Monitoring the confined space is the entire job.
Every worker involved in a confined space operation must be trained, and that training must be documented. CSA requires role-specific training covering hazard recognition, atmospheric testing, permit systems, PPE, emergency procedures, and rescue protocols.
That applies to entrants, attendants, entry supervisors, and rescue team members. And it must be refreshed whenever the program changes, when a worker takes on a new role, or after any incident or near miss. These requirements apply across every Canadian jurisdiction. Whether you're working under the Alberta OHS Code, BC's OHS Regulation, Ontario's Confined Spaces Regulation, or the Canada Labour Code, the obligation is the same: a written program, proper permits, tested atmospheres, trained workers, and a rescue plan in place before anyone goes in.
Confined space fatalities are preventable. The regulations are there. The standards are clear. What closes the gap between compliance on paper and safety on the ground is training, and a culture that takes the permit system seriously every single time, not just when someone is watching.
Stay safe out there.